Hey folks, welcome back. So we've come to the end of the line, literally. We've talked about GitHub, code commit, code build, code deploy. And these are the key components that make up our deployment pipeline. But what orchestrates all of this? Well, that's CodePipeline. CodePipeline manages this whole pipeline that we create. And we can create it in several different versions. We don't have to include all of the components that we're looking at. As an example, when we get to the walkthrough portion of our lessons, I'm going to skip code build. It's not required. But however we configure our deployment pipeline, we have CodePipeline to manage it for us. So let's click on our menu. Let's go into CodePipeline, and we've been looking at this, the whole section. We have our code pipeline, and let's say we've set it up. Our developers update code to our source repository, be it code commit, GitHub, can even be S3. Changes are built, code is deployed and tested, and finally, our application is deployed to our servers. And CodePipeline is orchestrating all of this. So what is CodePipeline? It's a continuous delivery service you use to model, visualize, and there's that magic word, automate the steps required to release your software. We could just use code deploy to deploy our software, but CodePipeline is, in a sense, our controller and manages all of this and makes it easier and automates it. So we've walked through the steps here. Developer commit changes to a source repository. Here's a key point. CodePipeline automatically detects those changes. Changes are built. If any tests are configured, those tests are run. After the tests are complete, the built code is deployed to staging servers for testing. From the staging server, CodePipeline can run additional tests such as integration or load tests. So there's one advantage of CodePipeline already. After a manual approval action that was added to the pipeline is approved, CodePipeline deploys the tested and approved code to production instances. And the approval process is a key point. We can add approval processes at any stage in our pipeline, and that is added in CodePipeline. We can deploy applications to EC2 instances by using code deploy, which is a part of our pipeline. We can deploy to Elastic Beanstalk or OpsWork stacks. And container-based applications can be deployed to ECS. So most of this is review. We've talked about most of this. CodePipeline provides us advantages of automation, our approval process, and a great interface to view our deployments. Now let's move to the next page. And let's just talk about CodePipeline artifacts. And those artifacts are files stored in our repository throughout our pipeline. They can be outputs of our pipeline, and they can be inputs to our pipeline. Now, I'm showing an S3 bucket, but this could be code commit, this could be GitHub, this could be GitHub linked to code commit. CodePipeline integrates with our development tools to check for code changes, and that triggers our build and deployment process. And again, each of our stages use artifacts stored in our repository. Source output artifacts. Build input artifacts. Think about a jar file. Think about our source code. So we upload our source code to our repository. Our build, let's say we're using code build, uses our source code and produces an output artifact. Let's go back to our Java example. A jar file. And then from that jar file, that can be an input artifact to our deployment process. So we start with one type of artifact and it is transformed as we move through our pipeline. So what is source code at the beginning of our pipeline becomes a deployable artifact at the end of our pipeline, again, such as a jar file for Java. Couple key points: our artifact store needs to be in the same region as the pipeline. Now, you can do cross-region actions, but you need to provide an artifact bucket for each region where you have actions. So again, that bucket needs to be in the region where you're performing actions on that repository's contents. Here's another advantage of CodePipeline. CodePipeline zips and transfers the files for input or output artifacts as appropriate for the action type in the stage. At this stage of the process, we're going to have a zip file. It is a pretty straightforward process at this point, especially since all of the lessons in this section have been building toward this. They've been a part of our pipeline. And now finally, we have everything in place and we're ready to implement our code pipeline. So I'm going to end this lesson here. In the next lesson, we'll actually go into the AWS Management Console and walk through a deployment using CodePipeline. So please join me in the next lesson.